Samsi. Here we go, guys. Story time on a little scooter. What are we doing? Well, journey to the center of the earth. Part 33 for us. What are we doing? We're just going to take a little cruise through the city. Mesa and Apache Junction. And that's about it. Nothing exciting there. Just a little old city drive. Some city traffic. Okay, so this story, Journey to the Center of the Earth, we finished off chapter 29. And now we's on to chapter 30. The terrific Saurian combat. Ooh, Saurian. Let's call Saurian. Saurian. I'm sorry, Saurian. Saturday, August 17th. The sea still retains its uniform monotony. The same leaden hue, the same eternal glare from above. No indication of land being in sight. The horizon appears to retreat before us more and more as we advance. My head, still dull and heavy from the effects of my extraordinary dream, which I cannot yet banish from my mind. Let's take a look at this drive. Okay, yeah, they got a nice little Bronco right there. And, you know, here in Arizona, you can filter through and get to the front of the line. And I generally don't do that with the little scooter because I'm just not the fastest guy on the road. But if it's plenty busy, you know, I will, because it makes a difference. You kind of get out of the way of everybody trying to do their thing. So other than that, yeah, there's really no point to do it because you can see everybody wants to go a lot faster than me anyway. All right, where the heck did we leave this thing off? Yeah, all of a sudden I lost my spot. Oh, there it is. He can't banish that crazy dream he had, so we'll pick it up. The professor, who has not dreamed, is, however, in one of his morose and unaccountable humors, spends his time in scanning the horizon at every point of the compass. His telescope is raised every moment to his eyes, and when he finds nothing to give any clue to our whereabouts, he assumes a Napoleonic attitude and walks anxiously. I remarked that my uncle, the professor, had a strong tendency to resume his old impatient character, and I could not but make a note of the disagreeable circumstance in my journal. I saw clearly that it had required all the influence of my danger and suffering to extract him 1 centillion of humane feeling. Now that I was quite recovered, his original nature had concurred and obtained the upper hand. Concurred? Conquered. Let's go with conquered. Oh yeah, we got to turn on that camera, you know. Got to get that. Got to get the camera on, and we stopped at the store here to get that camera thing figured out. All right. Walks a remarkable, yet conquered and obtained the upper hand. And after all, what had he to be angry and annoyed about now more than any other time? Was not the journey being accomplished under the most favorable circumstances? Was not the raft progressing with the most marvelous rapidity? What then could be the matter? After 1 or 2 preliminary hems, I determined to inquire. "You seem uneasy, uncle," said I, when for about the 100th time he put down his telescope and walked up and down muttering to himself. "No, I am not uneasy," he replied, in a dry, harsh tone. "By no means." "Perhaps I should have said impatient," I replied. softening the force of my remark. Enough to make me so, I think. And yet, we are advancing at a rate seldom attained by a raft, I remarked. What matters that? Cried my uncle. I am not vexed at the rate we go at, but I am annoyed to find the sea so much vaster than I expected. I then recollected that the professor, before our departure, had estimated the length of the subterranean ocean as, at most, about 30 leagues. Now, we had traveled at least over thrice that distance without discovering any trace of the distant shore. I began to understand my uncle's anger. We are not going down, suddenly exclaimed the professor. We are not progressing with our great discoveries. All this is utter loss of time. After all, I did not come from home to undertake a party of pleasure. This voyage on a raft over a pond annoys and wearies me. He called this adventurous journey a party of pleasure, and this great inland sea a pond. But, argued I, if we have followed the route indicated by the great Saknussemm, we cannot be going far wrong. That is the question, as the great immortal Shakespeare has it. Are we following the route indicated by the wonder sage? Did Saknussemm ever fall in with the great sheet of water? If he did he cross it? I begin to fear the rivulet we adopted for our guide has led us wrong. In any case, we can never regret having come thus far. It is worth the whole journey to have enjoyed this magnificent spectacle. It is something to have seen. I care nothing about seeing, nor about magnificent spectacles. I came down into the interior of the earth with an object, and that object I mean to attain. Don't talk to me about admiring scenery or any other sentimental trash. After this, I thought it well to hold my tongue and allow the professor to bite his lips until the blood came without further remark. At 6 o'clock in the evening, our matter-of-fact guide, Hans, asked for his weekly salary, and receiving his Rix dollars, put them carefully in his pocket. He was perfectly contented and satisfied. Sunday, August 18th. Nothing new to record. The same weather as before. The wind has a slight tendency to freshen up, with signs of an approaching gale. When I awoke, my first observation was in regard to the intensity of the light. I kept on fearing, day after day, that the extraordinary electric phenomena should become first obscured and then would go out wholly, leaving us in total darkness. Nothing, however, of the kind occurs. The shadow of the raft, its masts and sails, it's clearly distinguished on the surface of the water. This wondrous sea is, after all, infinite in its extent. It must be quite as wide as the Mediterranean, or perhaps even as the great Atlantic Ocean. Why, after all, should it not be so? My uncle has on more than one occasion tried deep-sea soundings. He tied the cross of one of our heaviest crowbars to the extremity of a cord, which he allowed to run out to the extent of 200 fathoms. We had the greatest difficulty in hoisting in our novel kind of lead. When the crowbar was finally dragged on board, Hans called my attention to some singular marks upon its surface. The piece of iron looked as if it had been crushed between two very hard substances. I looked at it. I looked at our worthy guide with an inquiring glance. "Tiandor," said he. Of course I was at a loss to understand. I turned round towards my uncle, absorbed in gloomy reflections. I had little wish to disturb him from his reverie. I accordingly turned once more toward our worthy Icelander. Hans, very quietly and significantly, opened his mouth once or twice, as if in the act of biting, and in this way made me understand his meaning. "Teeth?" cried I, with stupefaction, as I examined the bar of iron with more attention. Yes, there can be no doubt about the matter. The indentations on the bar of iron are the marks of teeth. What jaws must the owner of such molars be possessed of? Have we, then, come upon a monster of unknown species, which still exists within the vast waste of waters? A monster more voracious than a shark, more terrible and bulky than a whale? I am unable to withdraw my eyes from the bar of iron, actually half crushed. Is then my dream about to come true? A dread and a terrible reality. All day my thoughts were bent upon these speculations, and my imagination scarcely regained a degree of calmness and power of reflection until after I slept for many hours. This day, as on other Sundays, we observed as a day of rest and pious meditation. Monday, August 19th. I have been trying to realize from memory the particular instincts of those antediluvian animals of the second period, which, succeeding to the mollusca, to the crustacea, and to the fish, preceded the appearance of the race of mammifers. The generation of reptiles then reigned supreme upon the earth. These hideous monsters ruled everything in the seas of the secondary period, which formed the strata of which the Jura Mountains are composed. Nature has endowed them with perfect organization, with a gigantic structure. What a gigantic structure was theirs! What vast and prodigious strength they possessed! The existing saurians, which include all such reptiles as lizards, crocodiles, and alligators, even the largest and most formidable of their class, are but feeble imitations of their mighty sires, the animals of ages long ago. If there were giants in the days of old, there were also gigantic animals. I shuddered as I evolved from my mind the idea and recollection of these awful monsters. No eye of man had seen them in the flesh. They took their walks abroad upon the face of the earth, thousands of ages before man came into existence, and their fossil bones, discovered in the limestone, have allowed us to reconstruct them anatomically, and thus to get some faint idea of their colossal formation. I recollect once seeing in the Great Museum of Hamburg the skeleton of one of these wonderful saurians. It measured no less than 30 feet from the nose to the tail. Am I, then, an inhabitant of the earth of the present day, destined to find myself face to face with a representative of this antediluvian family? I can scarcely believe it possible. can hardly believe it true. And yet, these marks of powerful teeth upon the bar of iron. Can there be a doubt from their shape that the bite is the bite of a crocodile? My eyes stared wildly and with terror upon the subterranean sea. Every moment I expect one of these monsters to rise up from the vast carnivorous cavernous depths. I fancy that the worthy professor, in some measure, shares my notions, if not in my fears, for, after an attentive examination of the crowbar, he cast his eyes rapidly over the mighty and mysterious ocean. What could possess him to leave the land? I thought, as if the depth of this water was of any importance to us. No doubt he has disturbed some terrible monster in his watery home, and perhaps we may pay dearly for our timidity. Let's take a look at this drive. Again, nothing exciting. We just going straight towards the Superstition Mountains. That's a really nice part about the East Valley here, East Mesa, and Apache Junction is it butts up against some really nice areas there. You only got 20, 30 minutes. Within an hour, you're at 6,000 feet kind of thing. Anxious to be prepared for the worst, I examined our weapons and saw that they were in a fit state for use. My uncle looked on at me and nodded his head approvingly. He, too, has noticed what we have to fear. Already, the uplifting of the waters on the surface indicates that something is in motion below. Uh-oh. The danger approaches. It comes nearer and nearer. It behooves us to be on the watch. Tuesday, August 20th. Evening came at last, the hour when the desire to sleep caused our eyelids to be heavy. Night there is not, properly speaking, in this place, any more than there is in the summer in the Arctic regions. Hans, however, is immovable at the rudder. When he snatches a moment of rest, I really cannot say. I take advantage of his vigilance to take some little repose. But 2 hours after, I was awakened from a heavy sleep by an awful shock. The raft appeared to have struck upon a sunken rock. It was lifted right out of the water by some wondrous and mysterious power. Then started off 20 fathoms distance. "Eh? What is it?" cried my uncle, starting up. "Are we shipwrecked or what?" Hans raised his hand and pointed to where, about 200 yards off, a huge black mass was moving, up and down. I looked at with awe. My worst fears were realized. "It is a colossal monster!" I cried, clasping my hands. "Yes," cried the agitated professor, "and there yonder is a huge sea lizard of terrible size and shape. And further on, behold, a prodigious crocodile. Look at his hideous jaws and that row of monstrous teeth. Ha! He has gone." "A whale? A whale!" shouted the professor. "I can see her enormous fins. See how she blows air and water." 2 liquid columns rose to a vast height above the level of the sea, into which they fell with a terrible crash, waking up the echoes of that awful place. We stood, still surprised, stupefied, terror-stricken, at the sight of this group of feral marine monsters. Whew. All right, let's take a look at this little drive. I think we're getting close to knocking this thing off here, Yeah, all right. Thank you so much for coming along. And we'll catch up. We'll get a little further down the road next time. Sam C. And here she is. Everybody's waiting for it, I know it. Big old Rosie girl.